As we know, our credit profile in the credit industry, it's our credit identity. It shows, it reflects what accounts we have, how we have been paying it. Now, what a lot of consumers find is sometimes the information will either be reflecting incorrectly, or rather they'll pay up an account this month and the account will not be reflecting as paid up the following month. So it's anything to do with credit information. The office is there to assist the consumer to resolve the dispute between the credit provider and the consumer. On the other hand, we assist consumers with non-bank credit agreements. As a consumer, there may be a certain charge or a certain interest charge or a payment that did not reflect correctly or was not allocated correctly. As the Credit Ombud, the purpose of the office is to create fairness in the industry. It's to equal the scale, so to speak, to give the consumer a voice. We are an impartial body, which means that we act neither for the consumer nor the credit provider, but we are there to provide the mechanism to effectively resolve a dispute, and it's free of charge.
All right, so perhaps you could just give us some common complaints that you have to deal with on a daily basis. So
what I'll do is I'll give the two types of complaints that we receive. So the credit information, if a consumer has, for example, a retail card from a store where you purchase clothing or other items, if they feel, for example, that they're being overcharged, or rather that the balance is not reflecting correctly as per their credit profile. So you go to credit bureaus, there's major credit bureaus out there. We know that you get offers to extract a credit report to show what your accounts are. So if a consumer sees something in there that seems inconsistent with their history of payments or something that's reflecting incorrectly, all they have to do is approach the Credit Ombud, and we will assist them by providing them obviously with that avenue to resolve the dispute. But there is a process to follow. So the consumer needs to first approach the credit bureau from where the credit report was drawn. It's important to note though that a consumer is entitled to a free credit report once a year. Okay. On their birth, it normally applies on their birth date. So you get your free credit report, and you want to dispute information on the report. You contact the credit bureau first, lodge a dispute with them, allow them 20 business days to investigate, but most importantly, you must obtain a reference number, because that will be sort of your key to the office of the Credit Ombud in lodging the dispute. So we are the next step in the process. From a non-bank credit perspective, if a consumer, for example, they purchase an asset and they use credit to purchase that asset, but they're unsure as to the charges, they're unsure whether the charges are lawful, or they're unsure whether the interest rate that they are being charged is consistent with the Act. We are there to provide assistance to the consumer. One of the core mandates of the office is consumer education. That's getting the word out there about sort of this is what's fair in the credit industry, this is what's lawful, this is what's legal, this is what's expected from a provider, that if they have to proceed for collection in terms of the Act. So we are there to, as one of our core pillars is providing consumer education. It's to inform the everyday consumer so that they know what their rights are and they can protect it, and having an office there just to back up that. All right.
So overall, every credit-related matter that I as a consumer is not happy with, or I suspect that there might be some foul play or wrongdoing in there, I can come to the office of the Credit Ombud to lodge my complaint. I heard you speak of a non-bank credit something. School us a bit about that. What's that?
For sure. So a non-bank credit agreement is exactly what it says. It's any agreement relating to a non-bank credit. So for example, if you let me give it an example this way. If you have a dispute against a bank, you can't approach our office, unfortunately, is because there is a banking ombudsman for that. So there are different offices that have different forms of jurisdiction. So at the office of the Credit Ombud, it's a two-stage process. Do I have a dispute regarding a credit agreement? Is that credit agreement against the bank? If it's against the bank, then it's a no for the Credit Ombud. But if it is against the bank, then one may approach the ombudsman for banking services. But if ever a consumer is unsure as to where to direct the complaint, our office is there to provide that information and to inform the consumer as to the appropriate channel that they can resolve the dispute.
Now, throughout the year, we've been working very hard really to earn our bonuses and the little that we save. And it's during this time that we really want to have that fun. We want to enjoy ourselves. We want to spoil our families without having to worry about our bank balances. But I think the million-dollar question is, how do we do that responsibly?
So I think the perfect answer for that would be to refer to the midterm budget speech from our minister.
Do I still call it a budget? Because I was reading on one of your statements, you're calling it a splurging plan.
A splurging plan. So we try to be creative with the whole thing. We try to add some fun to it, because the reality of the situation is that when it comes to the actual spending, the swiping of the card or purchasing something, it does affect you. It affects you emotionally, it affects you mentally, it affects you physically, in terms of actual cash leaving your bank account. So we try to add a bit of a fun spin in advising consumers to tell them, listen, instead of a budget, tell yourself, listen, I want this sort of asset or this piece of clothing, or it may be a car, it may be a cell phone for that matter, that you want to spoil yourself with. At this part of the year, it's been a tough year. You want to spoil family, friends. You want to have events at home. You want to care for family members and friends.
There's
you want to help them out.
Tax that we have
exactly.
to go through.
I mean, you have to help families there. Obviously, you have to assist them. I mean, but the prudent thing is that the most dangerous thing is an uninformed consumer. That is the most dangerous, is because you're unsure what the future holds. As a consumer, a splurge sort of budget is basically to put together a list of things that you need, put together a list of things that you want. Most of all, it has to be tied in together with your actual finances that you have, your bonus, what your bonus is, how much disposable income do I have in December, how much credit am I able to take. It's important to note that credit is an important tool in life. It assists us in purchasing cars and houses and other assets otherwise we will not be able to afford. It's because nobody has that kind of
unless
money lying
you've won
around.
The lottery.
Exactly. So credit is a very real part of life, but the problem is, how do you manage it? And we know obviously that in this part of the year, there's a lot of offers such as buy now, pay later.
Yeah.
So what happens in February when you already inundated with expenses and you have an additional 3,000 or 2,000 an installment that you have to cater for? You obviously would go into default. So what we try to tell consumers, listen, at this part of the year, in fact, it should happen, in fact, a month before December, rather, when you're expecting your bonus. Sit down, put your expenses together, put in your bonus, see exactly what is that you have, and see what it is that you can afford. Because the most important thing is that you can afford the installment. And it's about putting expenses together and just making a prudent decision. I mean, our president referred to, he mentioned earlier this year that the policy that needs to be adopted nationally, but I think obviously also on an individual basis, is prudent borrowing, is informed borrowing. See whether you can afford it. Stringent cost expenditure to make sure that what you're buying, do you really need it, if you can afford it. But most of all, we have to take steps to try and bring down the debt trajectory, the effect that debt has on you. If you're inundated with debt, it affects you, it affects your family, it affects yourself, it affects your credit profile. It could affect you from getting a job in the future.
But how do you even know when you're inundated with debt?
So this is where the proactive side of the consumer needs to come in. I mean, your monthly statements, these days, everything is about technology. You receive your statements monthly. Make sure that you know what accounts you have. Now, this is where it becomes important for a consumer to know their credit profile. If you're unsure, draw a credit report. See what accounts are reflecting under your name, formal accounts. We know we do have informal types of loans. These things, consumers need to be prudent and need to write down exactly what it is that they have. But I mean, once you know what you have, you are able to take steps to either get out of debt or to take steps to rather better your credit profile. So the first step, my advice would be, is to approach a credit bureau, draw the credit report, because you must remember, a credit provider is compelled to list the account on your credit profile. So whatever accounts that you have, formal accounts that you have, are required rather to reflect on your credit profile. So that's the first step to finding out exactly what accounts you have and also what status it is that you are in terms of your payment history. Because it's important to remember that how I service my account now will have an impact on what credit is given to me in the future. That's one of the key elements that a credit provider must take into account.
Now, as I said on my introduction, that January is usually associated with stress and people being very broke. We do know that January is coming up next month, in fact, in a few weeks' time.
Yes, yeah.
But we'll be overspending and trying to please our families and so on. How do we ensure that we set ourselves free from the chains of debt? You've already spoken about the advertisements that we see, buy this item now, pay in 2 months' time. Let's just emphasize on that, because the reality is people still fall trap into this particular kinds of advertisements. Yeah,
I mean, at this part of the year, it's easy to fall into obviously the idea of I deserve it, I need it, I want it right now.
Do I even need it?
Do I even need it? Exactly. But as a consumer, remember, you are an individual. You need to be an informed consumer. You need to do the research, do the homework. If you see something that you like, maybe shop around, look for something cheaper. I mean, there's a lot of discounts that are happening. We know we just had Black Friday recently and stuff, which also was a splurge fest, I'm sure. But I mean, it's all about practically assessing and seeing what I can afford, because the reality is that if I overspend, I'm going to be overburdened in the new year.
True.
And I mean, it's a common fact that we currently spend more than we earn. It's a common fact with the rising cost of fuel, rising costs of basically with electricity. I mean, now with obviously with the failing electricity, we obviously the cost in gas and so forth, finding other avenues of obviously of dealing with your day-to-day living. It's important that you need to foresee the future costs. I mean, education is expensive. It's an expensive sort of it's an expensive cost these days. Not only the school fees, but the stationery and the clothing that comes with it. Put away something small so that you can address that expense in the future. I mean, I don't think there's any amount of advice that can be given to other than the fact that a consumer needs to be wise, they need to be prudent, they need to understand what their finances are and just be informed about their decisions. Maybe take a bit longer to decide on something that you're buying, as opposed to rushing off and buying something. Take a step back, ask yourself, can I afford it? Do I need it? Can I perhaps wait a couple months into the new year to see if I get an increase or if I get a further bonus and stuff? It's all about being prudent in your decision making.
In fact, listening to this interview, there's really so much to take from the discussion that we're having, and it takes me back to the point you made earlier on, that the Office of the Credit Ombud is also focused on education campaigns.
Yes.
How do you go about doing that? Do you travel across the different provinces? How do you go about putting out your educational campaigns?
So of course the Office of the Credit Ombud, we are a non-profit organization, so of course we do have limited budgets. So obviously we try to see where there is sort of a loophole, or rather an opportunity for us to speak about consumer education. I mean, we offer workshops, we offer a sort of an avenue called Double Impact, where we inform the consumer about their financial implications, about financial literacy, in hope that they would take that information and inform someone else. But if a consumer needs sort of if they need advice, or rather not advice but rather information as to what are their rights, what is, for example, the maximum interest rate that a credit provider can charge me, how is a credit provider supposed, or what is a credit provider supposed to do before they take a judgment against me or they list my name on the bureau? We are there to inform and provide that advice in terms of the National Credit Act. But we are always looking for opportunities on informing consumers and promoting obviously the office and what it does. So if anybody wants any sort of information on how we can further engage in that aspect, they're free to contact our office.
All right. Do you even go to schools? Because there's a say that if you teach a child, you teach the nation.
Yes, I know there are current initiatives basically to get involved in a basic learning education, because if you provide that at the roots, they'll obviously flourish in the beautiful flowers and trees.
Mommy, this is what we've been taught.
For sure, and I do foresee in the future that it will be an integral part of curriculum. It should be. Because in as much as it doesn't matter what income you have, if you can't manage that income correctly, if you can't make those informed decisions, and then not so much because you obviously may be a spender, but rather it's just about being informed. Rather, it's just about knowing the consequences and your rights in terms of the act.
But it really is very quite concerning that we're spending more than what we earn, and we're also not a saving nation as South Africans. So these 2 points are really concerning. So going back to the mandate of your office, really. So if I were to lodge a complaint with your office, after how long would I be able to get perhaps feedback?
Okay. So what we try to provide is consistent feedback to the consumer. So firstly, remember, with the credit information matter, the consumer first needs to contact the credit bureau, allow them 20 business days, and then approach the office. If the credit bureau comes back and gives a decision that the consumer is not happy with, or that they feel is incorrect, they can escalate it to our offices. With a non-bank credit matter, the same, you got to contact your credit provider, give them a chance to resolve it. If they can't resolve it within 20 business days, approach our offices. But once it's lodged at the office, so let me provide the mechanisms. First of all, we have a call center. We can lodge complaints telephonically. There's no need for you to send in faxes or emails and so forth. But if you prefer email, you can send in an email to our general email address. It's Ombud. It's info@creditombud.org.za. And you can contact our office on 0861 66 2837. That's 0861 66 2837. They can contact our offices and we will call them back. We will explain obviously what's the mandate for our office and how we can assist the consumer. And we also have an online platform. So if you just go to www.creditombud.org.za, you can lodge a complaint online. If you basically want to do it in the comfort of your home, or obviously after business hours. But there's something we introduced a couple years back. It's our free SMS line. So we have a free SMS. If you send an SMS to 44786, so that's 44786, we will call you back. It's a free SMS. We will call you back and we will basically
so
request.
that's a please call me.
It's sort of a please call me. It's a please call me, free credit help me sort of line sort of thing. Yeah, it's to assist and provide advice, and basically just to see whether or not you have a complaint that falls within the jurisdiction of the office. And if it does not fall within our jurisdiction, we will advise you on what other avenues are open to you, and we would refer you to the correct body. I mean, it's all about the industry coming together, and at a time where the country is obviously at a difficult sort of juncture, and it's about working together and trying to get our consumers informed so they can make better decisions.